Hello everyone, my name's Steve. Tell me, do you like horror movies or science fiction? Do you enjoy all these terrible stories about aliens who take over our planet, enslaving the human race or settling inside the human body? Ugh, that's terrible. But I used to like such films very much. I could watch something like this even at nighttime, and then I would sleep peacefully without worrying about waking up in a cold sweat from nightmares. But recently, something happened to me, and I stopped watching this movie genre. Want to know more? Well, this is exactly what I'm going to tell you today. Make sure you watch till the end of this video. Here we go. I should say, my parents loved traveling. Even before I was born, they had already traveled to a lot of countries. They had been to Europe, Asia, and even South America. Even though each country is beautiful in its own way, most often they preferred to go to the seaside or stay somewhere next to the ocean. When I was born, the three of us started traveling together. Even when I was a baby, I could easily endure long flights or bus trips. I would fall asleep all the time, so I was just a perfect kid for my parents. When I grew up a little and my curiosity started growing, I was keen to do some unusual excursions and entertainments. For example, I liked tours to some abandoned castles or a safari, or a long hike to the top of a mountain. Once, I almost got lost in the jungle. I was watching an exotic, beautiful bird and followed it deep into the jungle. Suddenly, I realized my group was not there. Of course, I got scared, but after 10 minutes I heard my parents' voices, and then I saw them. Later on, I always tried to stay close during our tours. One of my favorite countries was Thailand. We've been there 3 times. Every time we discovered some new cities and beautiful beaches. So the story I want to tell you today started in Thailand. Normally, me and my parents flew there for Christmas holidays. It's like a fairy tale to move from a cold winter to a hot summer. My classmates were always jealous when I showed up at school after Christmas holidays with a tan and a happy face. So this time, our choice fell on a small village located next to the Andaman Sea. It was a quiet fishing village. There were some mountains there and a beautiful jungle. Anyway, it was a perfect place to spend a family holiday. We had planned several tours in advance. We wanted to go boating, climb the mountains, and visit some local temples. Despite the fact that I've already grown up, I was still interested in exploring some new places with my parents. We went to the mountains with a small group. Our guide was one of the locals. Along our way, he told us about the history of the village, the jungles surrounding it, and exotic animals. He also warned us there were very dangerous insects there. He said their bite was fatal. It could provoke a severe allergic reaction that could sometimes cause death. Of course, this only happened quite rarely, but just in case, he advised us not to go deep into the jungle and instead to just move along the tourist path only. Not that I didn't take his words seriously, but I didn't see any insects around me, so I didn't worry much. We climbed the mountains, took amazing pictures, and went back. On our way home, we went by a different path to see the local waterfalls. It is a very beautiful sight. We were walking slowly, one by one. Suddenly, my attention got caught by a funny and fast animal. It jumped from branch to branch, and all the time it was hiding and running away from me. I really wanted to take a closer look at it, so I followed it, trying to keep the rest of the tour group in my sight. Unfortunately, I never caught up with the animal, but it wasn't lost either. As I was walking towards the group, I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder, as if several sharp needles had dug into it. I immediately guessed I had been bitten by some kind of insect, but I could not see the bite place on my shoulder. It did not turn red even after a couple of hours. At first, I wanted to complain to my parents, but seeing the bite was not dangerous and it did not cause any allergic reaction or irritation, I decided to keep silent. Knowing my mom, she would definitely start to panic. Our vacation went wonderful, although it was too fast as it seemed to us. Sometimes I looked at the bite, noticing that some red spot had appeared, but the wound looked just like a needle prick and I thought it wasn't dangerous. I started noticing some strange things when we arrived home. First, the bite started to itch. It took me a great effort to keep my hands to myself and to not scratch the wound. Second, some small red dots started to appear around the bite place. Apparently, an allergy started. I still didn't want to bother my mom, so I Googled which allergy pills to take and bought the medicine myself. After a couple of days, the spots started to pass, but another problem appeared, a terrible drowsiness. This was a side effect of the pills. There was nothing I could do about it. If I didn't take the pills, the allergy would start again, and it could lead to some bad consequences. Therefore, I successfully struggled with the sleep during my classes. But as soon as I came home, I immediately fell asleep, even forgetting about dinner. Of course, my mom was worried, but I told her it was just acclimatization. She bought it. A couple days later, the new symptoms appeared, a terrible headache and a fever. I lied to my mom again, saying I had a cold and I was not feeling well, so I would have to skip school. The bite site looked worse and worse. It turned into a huge red spot that itched, but it hurt to touch it. I remembered about the dangerous insects the local guide told us about, and I was really scared, as if this was the same bite that could become fatal to me. The next day, chills and nausea started. My mom was very worried about me, so she called an ambulance. They examined me carefully and immediately paid attention to my hand. It was all swollen, covered with spots, and there was something like pus in the center. Anyway, my situation got very dangerous for me. The doctors immediately found out from my parents whether we had been to Thailand recently. They said I should be taken to the hospital immediately. While we were driving to the hospital, my mom did not stop crying and scolded me for not telling her anything because I could have avoided these serious consequences. And what if some irreversible processes had already started in my body and they were dangerous for my life? I couldn't answer her. At that moment, I only dreamed the chills would soon pass and my head would stop hurting so much. Suddenly, my mom screamed and frightened both me and the doctors. She covered her mouth with her hands and pointed her finger somewhere in my wound. The doctors immediately appeared nearby and exclaimed in surprise. I was afraid to guess what was wrong there. I pulled my hand slightly towards me and saw some white, small maggots crawling out of the wound. Apparently, this sight impressed me so much that I fainted. While I was unconscious, it seemed to me that not just some small maggots were crawling out of the wound, but some huge white worms. Anyway, I became the character of the horror movies I used to watch myself. When I came to my senses, I was already in the hospital ward. My mom was sitting by my bed, talking to someone on the phone. My hand was completely bandaged. I concluded the doctors had done something to it, but later, my mom told me they only treated the wound, and they left it to confer, since such a case was the first in their career and they did not understand how to treat it. The next day, the doctors consulted their foreign colleagues. They decided to urgently operate because it was impossible to allow the aliens to remain inside my body any longer. Besides, my condition did not get any better. I had a high temperature, and the chills did not stop, and my consciousness drifted away from me sometimes. Anyway, it was getting worse and worse. The doctors performed the operation on the same day. I didn't know what the doctor saw there, but when I regained my consciousness, my mom told me one of the nurses fainted right in the surgery room from what she saw. After the operation, though, I immediately felt better. My temperature dropped, my consciousness cleared up. As the doctor later explained to me that day, I was bitten by an exotic insect. Its bite is harmless, but the fact was that it erected the larva in the wound that developed very fast under favorable conditions. The body itself reacts to an extraneous presence. It starts to defend itself. That's why all the symptoms appear. And if I had immediately said I was bitten by this insect, I could have avoided this terrible consequence. I should have been more serious about the guide's warnings. What would you do in my shoes? Would you get scared too? Would you tell your parents about the bite immediately? Maybe you have some experience in some exotic insects or animal bites too. If so, write your stories in the comments section. If you liked my story, click thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. There are a lot of interesting videos ahead. Click the bell button to stay tuned. See you around. Bye.